You're listening to a Weeby Geeks Network podcast.
The Dining at Disney podcast. The Dining at Disney podcast. Your ultimate source about the wonderful world of dining at the Disneyland and Walt Disney World resorts.
If you are what you eat, then I only want to eat the good stuff.
Kristen Hoetzel and Jay Brattain are your guides on this culinary adventure.
We'll prepare and serve with flair a culinary cabaret.
Join them as they discuss the latest food news, expert tips, recommendations, and trip planning advice related to Disney food and dining. From quick service to fine dining, you will discover all the best restaurants and food as they hungrily explore the Disney parks.
It brings folks together from all walks of life.
The Dining at Disney podcast. And now, your host, Kristen Hoetzel and Jay Brattain.
Welcome to the very first episode of Dining at Disney podcast. I'm Kristen. With me is Jay. How you doing, Jay?
Doing great. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Well, guys, so what we're going to do is kind of tell you guys a little bit about ourselves, you know, our Disney background, our foodie background, all that kind of fun stuff. So let's see. Jay, I'm going to let you start off and tell everybody a little bit about, you know, when did you first start going to the parks?
Oh, ever since I was a kid, like most people, I had the good fortune of living in Southern California, and as such, I had relatively, close access to the parks. Well, actually, when I was younger, it was just the park because there was only Disneyland, right? But I did live 2 hours away, and my parents weren't big, Disneyland people, so we just went periodically, and I enjoyed it obviously as a kid, and I have fond memories from that point. But the evolution of my love for Disney sort of grew in recent years. I think it was about 6 years ago that I had went to the parks. I was under a lot of stress. I was going to grad school at the time, and I just kind of needed a break, and so I was dating a woman, and we had decided to go to Disneyland on a date, and it was during the holiday time, and I don't know, just something hit me. There's something magical in the air, and when I looked around, I was like, you know what? This feels like a second home to me, and it's just something about, the atmosphere, the attention to detail, all the attractions, the people, the cast members, everything just kind of just grew on me, and it just made me realize, you know what? This truly is the happiest place on earth for me. And then, so now it evolved to where I go every 2 months or more frequently if possible. How about yourself? What about your Disney World / Disneyland love?
Okay, so I did not grow up near the parks at all. I grew up in northern part of Ohio, and so, amusement park to me was Geauga Lake, Cedar Point, Kings Island. That's what I grew up, going to and being used to. So my first trip was right after Christmas in '91, and it was a high school band trip. So we were playing the Orange Bowl and made 3 stops, or spent 3 days in Disney, 1 day at each of the parks. Of course, this is pre-Disney's Animal Kingdom. And from the first moment that I walked into the Magic Kingdom, I was sold. I was like, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. I mean, my best friend at the time, I've known her since I was 11 years old, and she grew up where her parents took her out of school every May to go to Disney. And eventually, after she graduated high school, her parents decided to move down to Orlando. Her mom was working for Disney, and she ended up down there as well. But it's one of those things that, kind of getting to, I had my own little guide because she knew where everything was and that. But it kind of started there, and then it became a thing where I would go every 2 to 3 years until, I guess it was '06, I think, maybe somewhere around '06, '07. I got my first annual pass. And that's when it became a problem because now I'm in Tennessee. It's about a 10.5 hour drive down to Florida, and started going to the parks 2 times a year. Then it became 4 times a year, and now it is up to as many as 6 times a year.
Oh my goodness.
My family thinks I'm crazy. And my first trip, because I feel like people who are Walt Disney World fans, many of them will say, well, refer to themselves as a level 5 Disney fan. But I feel like you can't ever say that until you've stepped foot in Walt's park. So until you go to Disneyland, you can't say you're that level, I don't feel. But so my first trip to Disneyland was in '09. And I got my first visit, about it and all that kind of stuff. But it was so exciting for me to get to see the original park and all these attractions that Walt personally touched himself. And so that was really cool to me. And starting with, I guess, about 3 years ago, I've made 1 or 2 trips a year out there. I go every January now, and then every other year for D23. So
that's great.
And I feel like in a sense, you can't really compare the two. People want to compare the two parks, and to a certain degree you can, but you can't at the same time. You know what I mean?
No, I mean, to me, they're 2 different entities altogether. Whereas Disney World is, very spread out, and really you have to devote at least, I'd say a week or 10 days, 2 weeks maybe, to going to Disney World if you're going to travel from a far distance. Whereas Disneyland, I mean, you can get it done in a few days. Of course, you probably want to go more than a few days, but because it's so compact, and you don't have to drive to get from one park to another park, and worry about all the transportation issues and things like that. All you have to do is walk across the courtyard, really. So it's more quaint in that regard. But it's they are definitely different experiences, and some people love Disney World more than Disneyland, and vice versa. So to each his own, and it's all about Disney food now.
I feel like the 2 parks, it's like having 2 children. You can't love one more than the other, but you feel differently about each of them.
True.
That's kind of how I see it. And not being local to a park, where you've got the advantage of being very close, and if you wanted to go twice a month, you could easily go twice a month.
Right.
That's not quite doable for me. So since my first trip, I think my next trip's going to make it 41 or 42 trips to Disney World, and then I have either 5 or 6 trips that I've made to Disneyland. And all my trips are always a minimum of 5 days, and they've been as many as either 11 or 12. So it seems to me that should count as like multiple trips, maybe.
Yes. Absolutely.
Okay, so we both love food, and how did you get into food to begin with? like, are you somebody who liked to cook, or just to eat, or?
Yeah, I guess it was sort of a slow evolution with that as well. When I was growing up, I was, I come from a bicultural family. My mother is Korean descent, and my father is American, white American, for lack of a better description. So, he liked the, meatloaf and potatoes and, that kind of thing. And whereas my mother had, kimchi and fish and rice and all that. So I had the blend of both cultures when it came to dining. So it wasn't boring when it came to dinner time at my house. But as I grew older, my father liked to go out to eat, and my mother wasn't into eating out so much, so he took me with him. It's like, whenever he had the opportunity, like, oh, let's go, go to lunch here or whatever. and it wasn't McDonald's. It would be some, a nicer place, with a really good menu and stuff like that. And I asked him one time. I said, "Well, why is it that you like to eat out so much?" He says, "Well, it's not just about the food." He says, "It's about the adventure, and it's about exploring, new foods through, new cultures through food, and kind of learning about the different dishes that are available." And I was like, that just really resonated with me. And I remember we were actually, I remember the exact restaurant we were at. It was an Argentinian place. And I was like, it was kind of bizarre because I'd not tried Argentinian food before. And, for him to say that at that point was just really profound for me. And then as I grew a little bit older, I had more money to spend to go out to eat and stuff like that. And, I guess when you're in your 20s, you kind of, you eat for quantity, not quality. But then, as I got a little bit older in my 30s, it was more about quality than quantity. And that's where I'm at now. I'm 40 plus years old, and to me, it's like if I'm going to go out to eat, I want to eat the best that's available. I'm not going to stuff myself with, a double-decker hamburger, for McDonald's. I mean, for people who like that, great. So, so be it, and more power to them. But, if I'm going to get a burger, I want that gourmet burger with like mushrooms and truffles and aioli, a garlic aioli on, a brioche bun. You know what I'm saying? I want it to be something real good and something flavorful.
Oh, yeah.
How about yourself?
See, I started, in order to pay for college, I got a job waiting tables. And prior to that, growing up, I was not a kid that was all about food or any of that kind of stuff. So, but I was the kid who didn't like their vegetables, but, Mom and Dad said, you have to finish your plate. So I would find condiments and other things in the refrigerator and like seasonings and stuff. So I kind of, as a kid, would play with flavors to make my food so I could eat it, or at least not hate it so much. And I started waiting tables, and from then just kind of got into really liking food. And I worked for a couple of really good restaurants. One of them was a New Orleans-based restaurant, and from there I kind of, we got to try all of the menu items because I was there when the restaurant opened. And from that, you just kind of learn about good food, and they would have our wine rep and liquor rep. They would come in every other month, tell us about new wines and how they pair with foods, and would teach us about how to pick up the smells and the flavors in the wine and why it pairs well with certain dishes. And that just kind of intrigued me. And when I first moved out on my own, you're cooking, and I kind of would find things in the refrigerator. I was working a job where I got home late at night, and you go through the refrigerator and you start pulling stuff out and go, let's see if this stuff works together. And kind of got into where I wanted to cook. And for a while, was taking cooking classes. Wanted to, a few years ago, looked into going to culinary school. However, it is so expensive. And I'm like, considering my age, I'm like, I'm not going to, that much money to do it is just, it's too much for the amount of work time I have, Right. One of those things where it was like, yeah, if I was 15 years younger, I would totally be doing it, but almost $100,000 to be able to own, operate, and cook at my own restaurant is just takes a lot of time to pay off that much money. So
absolutely. So yeah, I actually when I was younger I didn't cook, but as I grew older and now I do cook all the time. Since I got married, my wife, I love her, but she doesn't know how to cook. I mean, she can bake cookies and pastries, to like nobody's business. I mean, she's awesome at that. It just, but cooking, she knows 2 dishes, and both of them were taught to her by her father. And one is fried rice, and the other one is I believe wontons. And I've only tried the fried rice, so and it's good, but yeah, I mean, she just she's just that's not what she likes to do. Me, I love to, like you, I love to experiment, try different flavor combinations, different texture combinations. I like to sort of blend things that aren't necessarily items that you would normally associate being connected together. It kind of is sort of the way I cook is what I try to do is, I guess, is emulate what I taste at restaurants. So if I try I remember recently a friend of mine we went to a burger place down the road here, and they had a PB&J burger, and it was interesting that they had peanut butter on top of the burger along with sriracha sauce and jelly. And you're thinking, okay, what does a Vietnamese hot sauce have to do with peanut butter and jelly? But it actually ties in, all the flavors and acts as sort of a conduit of, to incorporate it well with the meat of the burger. And it just that's mind blowing. So I'm able to do the same thing at my house as well. And it's fun for me. I just hate doing dishes, but that's okay.
Perfect though, because she's the baker and you're the cook, so that
right,
works
exactly.
out nice. Now see, I cannot bake. I made a cake the other day, and I followed exactly the directions on the box and the way it said, and it's still just, I'm like, I don't know what it is about baking, but it's not my thing. My mom used to make all kinds of like candies and cookies and cakes and all that kind of stuff growing up, and it did not rub off on me at all.
Yeah.
Not one bit. That's her thing. But when it comes to the kitchen and creating dishes myself, that I've got, and I think they're both 2 different types of science.
They are. Cooking to me is more fluid than baking. Baking, you have to be very precise in your measurements and baking times, and got to make sure to pull it out here and whatever. And with cooking, it's like, I'll throw a little extra salt, or I'll throw a little extra pepper. How about just a touch of garlic, see how that goes, and you just kind of just play with the ingredients. It's a lot more flexible.
Yes. I agree, and I think that's why I like cooking, because I can be very creative and not have to worry about turning something to a complete disaster. Because if you start playing around with, you can end up with a cake that's like this big, or it's completely flat, and
Yeah. So how did you I guess when you were going to the parks, Disney World and so forth, when you were younger, I mean, what is it that made you discover the unique food that was there? Was it like the Food and Wine Festival, or just that you just kind of stumbled upon some really great dishes, that kind of thing, or how did that come about?
To begin with, my first, I think it was my third trip. My third trip, which was the second one that I took, that was like a non-family trip, and I tried a restaurant and did not like it. I was like, this is not good, for the prices on it. I didn't think it was good, and at the time I was waiting tables, and so I went. We decided the rest of the trip, we're like, okay, we'll do one other table service, and then the rest of the time we'll just find some unique, counter service places. And then it was probably another 3 years before I went back and dined in a restaurant and really, really loved it. And my next trip, I went back to the same place. But it got to the point where I was like, okay, I can't eat at the same, 5 places every time I go. I need to kind of expand things, and the food's good. And as I said, because of studying, like I have the Culinary Institute textbook at my house. Like I've ordered it online as something to learn to kind of help with all of that stuff. To be more of an expert about not just eating in a restaurant, but food itself and the way it should be cooked and what's proper. And happened to start eating at a few restaurants, and I got involved back in the day when chat rooms were still around, getting in chat rooms and talking about restaurants, and people always had all these questions. And I kind of thought, well, this is interesting. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll try that restaurant next time. So then I think it was maybe an 08 or 09. I told Aljon, we can eat, depending on how long we're there, either 1 or 2 restaurants that we normally eat at. Everything else has to be a new restaurant. And then it kind of became a challenge. I was like, I'm going to dine everywhere at Disney. I'm going to dine at every quick service, every snack stand, every table service. And so we started doing, and it started with the Disney dining plan when they first launched it. And then it was like, okay, when we do this one restaurant, everything else has to be new until we hit everything. And then, so now that I've dined at every restaurant, it becomes, is there a new menu or a restaurant we haven't been to in a while? And for the longest time, I kept track of every restaurant and when I ate there. And somewhere I have part of that. The other part, I still need to go through all the receipts because, you go so frequently and you start just not thinking about writing that anymore.
Right.
But so that's pretty much where that all started from.
That's cool. Well, when I was growing up and I went to Disneyland, I to be honest, I hated the food. I thought it was just atrocious. It was terrible. I distinctly remember going to the Tomorrowland Terrace, and I got a hamburger, and when I bit into it, I was like, what the heck is this? It was so dry. It was like just a piece of meat that was kind of sandwiched between two, like a bun, I guess, if you want to call it that, and it was like cold and hard, and I was like, and then the French fries were soggy, and it was terrible. And so I wasn't really a fan of the food for a long time until, again, when I fell back in love with Disneyland again, I just started eating a little bit, just quick service stuff, counter service or what have you. But I didn't really go for the full service menus. But then I met my wife and we started experimenting a little more, and we sort of challenge ourselves. It's like, you know what? Let's eat at every place there is at the Disneyland Resort, and we've done about 90% of the restaurants, and whether it be quick service or full dining or fancy restaurants, whatever. It just became one of those things that it became part of the experience for us of going to Disneyland, and so now. I am, I decided, why don't I write about it or, talk about it, and, as for people who don't know, I'm on the DizGeek podcast as well, and they can check us out, dizgeek.com. Anyways, we, periodically feature a food segment, and so I started doing that, and then I met Kristen, and I was like, wait a second, maybe we can do a podcast about food. Let's do this. Yes. Disney food. Let's do this. So,
well, and the thing is, if it were not for the DizGeek podcast, you and I wouldn't know each other because, and I don't even know how Aljon and I got connected with Daniel to begin with, but he's pretty much what kind of set all this in motion. I guess it's been, about 2 years now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing.
So...
That's cool. Well, it worked out well, obviously, and hopefully our listeners enjoy as well. So.
Okay, since we mentioned Diz Geek podcast, maybe we should talk a little bit about some of our previous adventures, whether it comes to like vidcasts, podcasts, blogging, whatever. So you want to tell them a little bit about what you've done?
Oh, sure. Well, I wrote for the Dining at Disney the Dining at Disney website for a while. I kind of stopped for a little bit. I embarked on a new endeavor, actually doing a food tour, unofficial food tour of Disneyland. It's called the Magical Food Tour, which you can visit me at magicalfoodtour.com. And I've also, again, talked about it on the podcast, on the Diz Geek podcast. And I've done a lot of writing in the past. I used to write for other magazines, but it was automotive in nature. So I have experience writing, and I did go to graduate school, so I'm used to writing a lot of stuff. So yeah, and so I just figured that I could put my talents to this, and this is actually my first video podcast, vidcast, if you will. And yeah, so hopefully I'm doing okay.
I actually really like doing vidcasts because you can see the person you're talking to, and for those of you listening, we are going to be turning this into just audio podcast as well. So people will have the option that they can either watch us or from their computer, or download it, put it on, your iPhone, iPad, any kind of mobile device, and take it with you. Listen in the car, or whatever. You can even listen to it while you're working out. That way you can think of like how many calories you need to burn to have your next Disney meal, right? So, but yeah, that'll be available all of those different ways. And let's see, how did I get started? As I mentioned, with being on a message board, and it kind of started from there, and this is before really anybody was blogging. And I kind of used that as a way to blog about writing food reviews, and I noticed in chat rooms and message board, everybody was talking about Disney food, and I was like, well, I know about food. So it kind of started from that, and then for a while I was doing Cooking with Mickey. I was doing that blog and cooking videos that way to show people how to make them at home, because so many people look at a recipe and go, oh my, I am so overwhelmed by this. And to kind of show people how easy it was to do that, and then got on Sorcerer Radio and working with all the DJs over there, and just networking. And that's, like I said, that's how somehow we met Daniel, through networking, and that's how I met you. And I can say it's one of the coolest things about the Disney community is when you get to network with other people who like the same things you do. It's fun because you can find one thing that you have in common, and like Disney, and then you find out, oh hey, we both like food, or we both like the same sport, or gets to be fun.
Cool. So I guess for future podcasts, I think that our listeners can look forward to sort of a format that will be easily digestible, if you will. I think that we'll do a news segment, which we'll call our appetizer section, and then from that point we'll go to our feature presentation, which we'll label our main course, and then how about, you gotta, any good meal, you gotta have some dessert, right? So
of course.
So we gotta provide a little sweetness, and by giving some tips, some secrets maybe, something from Disney World, something from Disneyland, and then also, we'll post some listener questions and stuff like that. That way, if you have something that you want answered about the parks, where's the best this, or where's the best that, or what if you have dietary needs and so forth, we'll be happy to answer them on air. And anyways, let's see, am I forgetting anything? Let's see.
I don't think so.
Oh yeah. So and then as far as the main courses are concerned, we'll try to cover a wide array of topics. Anywhere from like the best restaurants, the best places to grab a snack, or best places for dessert, or that type of thing. And maybe come out, evolve into other things as well, the other topics, and maybe, who knows, if things go right, maybe we can even like bring on a guest or something. I mean, who knows? Sky's the limit.
Oh yeah, that's the one thing. Food is always changing, and between the two parks, you have probably more than 400 restaurants to try. So that's a lot of places we can talk about.
Absolutely.
And of course, you've got the 60th anniversary out your way, starting up soon. So
Yep.
I'm sure there'll be some special food items and stuff that we'll be able to talk about, or dining experiences. Out at Disney World, there's always Food and Wine Festival, and coming up in just a couple of days, you've got the Flower and Garden Festival, and they've added food to that. I can't tell you how excited it made me when they decided to add food to that. I was like, oh no, I have a reason to go to Flower and Garden.
Yeah, I was actually surprised about that. I guess they hadn't done food as a feature in the past, correct?
Yeah, this is the 22nd year of Flower and Garden, and the third year that they've had food.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah. Well.
So the food aspect.
Well, so it's relatively new, so that's cool. Yeah, I actually wanted to know a little bit more about that, and I think this podcast is a perfect way to learn, right?
Yeah.
And they actually used to have a food and wine festival at the DCA back in the days, before it became DCA 2.0, and I really miss that. I wish. I mean, if we had to sacrifice the Food and Wine Festival for Cars Land, so be it. But I still think that there's room to bring back the Food and Wine Festival. So if any Disney executives, Disney employees hear this podcast, hey, put in a good word for us. Get that back, please.
I never got to experience that. I remember writing about it, but letting people know it was coming up and that kind of stuff. But I never got to experience it. So.
Yeah, well, from what I heard, it's something similar to what they have at Disney World, but it's still unique, obviously, because it's California. But they had really great deals on wine and stuff. I mean, it was unique food and all that. But I miss it, and I hope they bring it back someday. But anyways, so I guess that's a wrap for now.
I think so. I think that sounds good. So. One thing we should mention is, of course, where everybody can find each of us. And I would like to say, if you have questions that you would love for us to answer, or you have, comments, please feel free to contact us at podcast@diningatdisney.com. And we'll get back to you, and your questions will be answered on the show. And so, Jay, where can everybody find you?
Basically all my social media accounts are Magical Food Tour. So you do facebook.com/Magical Food Tour, Twitter, at Magical Food Tour, magicalfoodtour.com. It's pretty much consistent. So contact me there if you have any questions or interested in a tour, of course.
And to tune into Diz Geek Podcast as well.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, how could I forget my buddies? Sorry. Tommy, Chris, my buddies. Definitely. You can check me out on the Diz Geek Podcast. That's at, like I said, dizgeek.com, and also on Twitter it's at Diz Geek Podcast. We talk about everything about Disneyland and DCA, the whole Disneyland Resort, and just really covering specifically those areas. We don't try to expand on any other topics.
And you can find me at diningatdisney.com, also on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, all of those fun places. It's going to be Dining at Disney. On YouTube, we are The Dining at Disney. So make sure to check us out. We will be doing these podcasts / vidcasts every 2 weeks. So make sure to keep up with us and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Kristen.
I'm Jay. Bye.
Bye. Bon appetit.